Hello and welcome to ADHDKC Conversations. I'm one of your hosts, Kristen Stuppy, and I'm so glad you're here with us today. If you're a parent, caregiver, or just someone looking to learn more about navigating life with ADHD and neurodivergence, you're in the right place. And today we're joined by our co-host, Dreher. She is ADHDKC's newest marketing coordinator.
Hey, everybody. I am so happy to be here and join you again. And I am so excited to get to know our guest.
I am also excited to introduce Bronwyn Foley. She is an ADHD and life coach. She helps people understand their ADHD brains and bodies in ways that feel both grounding and empowering. We're very excited to have you here today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really honored to be a part of this conversation.
Bronwyn, let's start with your story. What drew you into this work supporting people with ADHD?
Well, I had a midlife diagnosis, probably around 45 years old. It was the typical managing to make life work until motherhood kind of breaks you.
Yep.
I say it broke me because motherhood is like the principal blessing of my life. But the demands of motherhood finally caught up with me. Specifically, one night I had scheduled, this is right around the holiday, so it is already a busy time.
Mm-hmm.
But my company party was going to be at my house, and I scheduled it on this night. And then it turns out another calendar, I had my son's Christmas play on the same night.
Oopsie.
No, right? Exactly. It was so adorable because it's my daughter. I was talking about them at different times. My daughter, who was, I don't know, 9, said, "Hey, Mom, isn't that the same night as Nicholas's play?" My God, it is. So it was at that moment that I finally thought I need to investigate this because it did seem a possibility in the past. But for various reasons related to the prevailing narratives around ADHD and probably a lack of useful narrative around ADHD in women, I sort of avoided it. So I made this commitment that day to start looking into this. And lo and behold, I found a video of a physician who had discovered his own ADHD later in life. And it was a short video, half an hour maybe. But by the end of it, I was like, this is it. I mean, this is the piece, the missing piece. So it was quite a day.
I feel like so many adults in today's world, especially women, did not know that they were growing up with ADHD. They learned tools, organizational skills, all kinds of things just on their own, fell into whatever they've done with their life, only to figure out that they have ADHD. And a lot of times it's after their children were diagnosed. But
Okay.
as another one of those who were diagnosed as an adult, that I'm sure gives you a great perspective on what others might be going through. How does that help you as an ADHD and life coach?
Well, I do have a number of people who find their way to my Zoom room who are late in life diagnosed. So immediately it gives me the opportunity to get a picture of, um, there's this line, like when you get the diagnosis or when you're identified, your nervous system becomes clearer to you between everything that happened before and now what am I trying to do going forward? I'm able to relate to the fact that these folks have developed their own strategies, their own workarounds, their own beliefs, even their self concept, which some of it might be based in some negative thoughts, narratives. It sort of provides a launching pad then for, okay, before times, you didn't know what you were working with. Now I'm here because I have information about what you're working with. And in addition to that, I have a lot of experience and information about things you might try, discover, experiment with going forward to create different results and different awarenesses.
What are some of the most common things that you see people struggle with that might be related to ADHD, whether or not they realize they have ADHD?
Well, one of the, since we kind of touched on women with ADHD, a lot of women with ADHD can be very intensely together. I may have been one of those women until I double scheduled my parties.
Motherhood does rock the world.
It happened.
The things that, I knew about. You sort of overcome, you sort of like like overcorrect almost.
Yep.
To the point of it's really energetically depleting. So a lot of ADHD women are incredibly hard working women who can really wear themselves out in a world that's designed for neurotypicals, trying to create neurotypical results with their uniquely wired brain. So that is something that's very interesting. Um, it's confusing because as an ADHD coach, I have a unique place in people's lives because I understand that really my work is the work of the worried well. There actually isn't necessarily this drastic psychological phenomenon that you're dealing with. You're actually in a world that's designed for a different nervous system. You've been trying to engage it with the tools of the neurotypical world from the time you were a little person. And you've had some really frustrating and inconsistent results. This isn't necessarily a psychological phenomenon that you have to continue to return to. It's actually a very practical thing. This is what your brain's trying to do. This is what you want to have happen. Let's figure out how you might best do it. Does that make sense?
That makes complete sense. First of all, I gotta add, so I was diagnosed in mid-30s when, of course, kids came along and all of a sudden I'm like going crazy and I'm like, okay, what is wrong? I have never been like this. And so figured that out, which was interesting, but there's always been such a, this black cloud around because it's a disability. And I'm like, okay, yes, it is technically, but I'm like, but it is what it is. And it was so freeing for me to figure it out. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go get this medical diagnosis, even though it doesn't really change anything or I'm not seeking a cure. Right. And when I very first got diagnosed, I'm like, oh my God, there's this like whole world of answers that makes so much sense now and connected so many dots. Not to say that there is not the, let's say, crappy side of ADHD as well as the really awesome side of ADHD. So I'm curious to know, in your opinion, as an adult in this kind of same situation, what are the pros and cons of being diagnosed as an adult?
Well, I think I've thought about this a lot, of course, because I do work with families. I work with parents and their kids. And I, of course, didn't really get a clear picture of my nervous system until I was 45.
I can relate.
When I was growing up, first of all, I don't think there was much hope that I was going to get quote unquote diagnosed because girls didn't have ADHD. So, whatever was going on with me, I did have one of my favorite teachers who really believed in me tell my mother in a conference, she just doesn't know how to work, which actually was true,
Mm-hmm.
but not in the way I think he was necessarily meant in that moment.
Yes,
Didn't
no.
understand. Yeah, exactly. I remember thinking, what does that mean? What am I going to do with that? I think that a generation earlier, I'm a Gen Xer, their ADHD was thoroughly pathologized. It was definitely something that was wrong with you rather than something that is different about you. So, I follow the work of Dr. Bill Dodson. And what he'll say very carefully in his talks is that you have sort of an ADHD style nervous system. It's a second kind of nervous system, different from neurotypical, called neurotypical not because they're normal, but because there are more of them.
Didn't think about that.
Right? Typical. I think I escaped some of that. Indeed, we are asking all people to show up in the world, which is designed for neurotypicals. We're asking kids to show up to produce results in schools that are very limited in the levels and types of engagement they allow.
Yeah.
And yes, ADHD is good. It's going to show up as a disability. And I'm cool with that because the system is so rigid that folks need every lever they can get to help make that environment work for them. They deserve it because it is very, very narrow, the path to success. Here's the the cons, of course, I guess. I kind of, I didn't have to be late all the time if I had more information. It's conquered my lateness like I have. Because as soon as I learned about my nervous system, I started to rethink how I approach things. And I'm on time now.
Right?
So
That's a huge, huge thing. I know many, many adults with ADHD that know they have ADHD, that medicate for ADHD, that have done therapy with ADHD, still are late chronically. So that's a huge thing for you.
it
Congratulations.
is huge. Yeah.
My husband is one of them.
Well, truly, I'll ask you this question. If you want to take a slight turn down the linear time road, you have to ask yourself as an ADHDer, how do you know when it's time to leave? And usually it's when you feel it's time to leave. Because our emotional lives are, we're up a notch. We're emotionally intense. It's one of the 4 dozen endorsed symptoms or core symptoms of ADHD. So if you feel like it's time to leave, you're probably operating with an urgency, which means you're late. If you're waiting to feel like it's time to leave all the time, it's never going to work. You have to stop waiting to feel it. And it's a cognitive exercise, knowing when to walk out the door. It's not a feeling thing. Not like suddenly the door was like wide open for me.
I have a decently drastic amount of anxiety, which is super fun. But I also have a terrible sense of direction. And honestly, I know where I'm going half the time because I've gotten lost getting there before, and now I know.
Okay.
But-
Well, that's one way to learn, Lauren.
Right. It absolutely is. But I have to leave super early. I'm always like 10 minutes early to everything because I'm so worried that I'm not going to know where I'm going. And so I leave, give myself time to get lost.
Just think of the tools we have today. You have GPS.
Yep.
You have notifications where your phone can alarm when you need it. These are things, 10, 20 years ago, people could not rely upon. I don't know
Right.
how people with ADHD did things back then.
I'll say, Kristen, if I can say about the notifications, in defense of those who are struggling, even though they have notifications, it wasn't until, because in the before times, I would see the notification, but I wouldn't feel necessarily. The notification would be my alarm that oh my gosh, I should have gotten this done up to this notification. I better get going. But now that it is literally just it's a cognitive thing. I don't worry about how I feel about getting out the door. And it's just the first. It's not my total solution, obviously.
Yeah.
But it was the first step in me reconfiguring how I perceive these events and how I engage them. And it was thanks to my diagnosis.
Okay. I love that you just said that because I think that is such a pro. It's something that I really appreciate about being diagnosed later in life because you know what it's like essentially to not be ADHD, even though you are, but then you kind of know, okay, here's the other side of it. And so you understand people that don't have the diagnosis. I love that part about myself getting diagnosed later in life because I feel like I have a really good grasp of both sides and of the people who are like, I don't know. And I'm like, I do. I most very likely do. You should go talk to your doctor. But it helps me allow them to connect those dots because I'm like, I get it. I get where you're at in this spot, but then I can also speak to the other side. Especially for women being diagnosed later in life. So having that different perception, I think is really powerful. And I don't think that that's thought of enough. It's very chaotic. And I'm like, it's actually, I don't know, not a bad thing. I don't think. You're here now, right?
Well, and you've talked about the cons, but what makes you grateful to have ADHD?
Well, okay, so this is one of the axioms of my practice is we all have strengths. No matter what we're doing, no matter what our results or output, we all have better resourced areas than others. And I consider those our strengths. Our strengths aren't free. We don't get to be a perfect 10 or whatever in every single part of being human. We have other areas
Mm-hmm.
not as strong. And I appreciate my strengths. And my strengths are correlated with ADHD. A strong conceptual thinking, a willingness to take risks, emotive, things like the creativity, love of learning,
Yep.
curiosity. These are things that are very important to me. And I would never trade them. And I will say, again, I mean, I'm going to sound like a one-hit wonder. I do follow other folks. Dr. Dodson, like, he nailed it because he worked with adults with ADHD before anyone said there could be such a thing, listened to them respectfully, and collected information over the course of a 30-year career. I think it's 30 years. I don't know. Neurotypicals have what he calls access to something called secondary importance. This is really important for parents to understand about their ADHD kids. So secondary importance is, I'm the teacher, here's your worksheet, this is important, you're going to do it this way at this time, etc. So a neurotypical can receive that, can do it to some degree of completion and turn it in on time. Because that really is the key thing. We don't make sure everyone's excelling before we move them on. Just make sure they do it within the block of time and basically the way we want them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
ADHDers can't even start the worksheet. Sorry, I keep going off screen here. ADHDers can't even start the worksheet much of the time because they're looking at the worksheet and they're like, why am I doing this? And why should I make this important? Your importance isn't my importance. And I am grateful. Despite all the challenges that may have caused me, I am grateful to be a person who finds importance in different ways.
I would totally agree with that.
It's fantastic to look at. Yeah.
Hard concept to articulate too. It's hard to explain to people how hard it is for ADHDers to focus on something, whether it be a subject or a task or something that they don't care about or they don't understand why they need to care about it.
And it's interesting though, because it is a neurological reality. And it's not as if we don't live in a world where only our importance matters.
Mhm.
It's not reality. But understanding that that's the response your brain is giving you, and then having the door open to the idea that there are ways that you can create it or recognize it or initiate around importance is really a relief for a lot of ADHD.
Well, I tell kids all the time that it might not be their fault that they're the way they are, that they struggle with motivation or remembering things or whatever it is that they're struggling with. It's not their fault, but it is their problem.
Yeah.
And they can always problem solve and come up with ways to help themselves.
Well, how brilliant, Kristen, because ADHDers are wonderful problem solvers.
Yes. So, and I do feel like, I love listening to coaches and therapists and everybody else because as a pediatrician, I've learned a lot about the brain and the neurology and all of the medical aspects of things, how to medically manage ADHD. But can you talk just for a minute about how your work as an ADHD coach, how you work with people to help them help themselves?
Well, specifically in my practice, I'm very strengths focused. So the ADHD brain is a stimulus hungry brain. That imagination is active all the time and it very much wants to participate in your day. So when ADHDers struggle without any knowledge about what's going on with their nervous system, they can sometimes over time develop sort of a negative bias. A lot of negative self-talk. And in a way, that kind of whipping of yourself becomes this way of initiating. That becomes their sort of go-to tool for getting themselves to get going. So what I'm really here to do is to help them shift their focus from that negative bias, from the stimulus, because the thing about a stimulus to our brain, it doesn't care if the stimulus is positive or negative. It just wants stimulus. So I'm here to help them shift their focus to their strengths, to the things that are available to them all the time, Sorry, my daughter just texted me an excited text. It just showed up on my screen. So things that are right about them, that are available to them all the time, and then start to unpack where those have shown up in their lives, where they've created success they haven't seen or acknowledged. The problem is that successes, because they're based in strengths, and strengths can feel instinctive, can feel natural, they kind of take them for granted sometimes.
Yeah.
And so they are out of working memory because we don't pause to savor them, to explore success, to unpack how we created success so that we can create more success. And when we
Absolutely.
pause, really understand that feature, to just understand those outcomes, then you have a roadmap for creating similar outcomes. So that's really one of the key things I want to do first, is start to look at what's right about my clients.
Absolutely. And Bronwyn, as we are wrapping up, that goes perfectly into, where people are at when they come to see you, being probably overwhelmed, whether it be in a good spot or a bad spot, and feeling misunderstood, whether it be them misunderstanding themselves or those around them. So if you could tell our listeners one thing, especially those feeling that overwhelm and that feeling of being misunderstood, what would it be?
If you could have done differently, you would have. You're doing your level best. So please start there and give yourself that grace. It might be challenging because if your stimulus starved brain is feeding on a sense that a story about how you're doing poorly, you kind of have to pull it away from that negative narrative. I will joke with my clients. I use metaphor a lot, and I use very light metaphors.
Yeah.
Because we're already so like, no one can tell you a terrible story like an ADHDer. You're just like, oh, tell me how bad you feel. Well, let me tell you. And you're just like, it's like a film. It's like incredible. And it is, I offer the imagination, the default mode network, getting its stimulus from a very negative place that isn't necessarily reality. I mean, that's really what strengths are about. Strengths are about what is the reality of you. The reality of you is we start with what you do well, and you have lots of things you do well. So I will joke with my clients when they're stuck in someplace negative, I'll say, okay. And they'll even come to the Zoom room and say it. Brain is in the chips. You got to get your brain out of the chips. So it's like the Costco size giant kettle. They're the best chips. The kettle bag of chips. The brain is jumped in. The brain has jumped into the chips, and we've got to pull it out and give it some neurological nutrition. You got to take inventory of everything that's going well, everything that's right, because there are a lot of things that are going well and that are right about you. That's the baseline, and that is reality.
I'm going to steal that. Pull your brain out of the chips.
Well, thank you so much, Bronwyn, for sharing your time and expertise with us today. I really cannot wait to hear more from you at the ADHDKC Parent Group event in June. And if you are joining us today and want to learn more about her, you can head over to bronwynfoley.com. She'll be presenting at our June event for the ADHDKC Parent Group about helping kids learn to regulate when they're triggered. And of course, as always, as a CHADD chapter, we remind people that CHADD does not endorse products, services, publications, medications, or treatments, including those advertised in any of the podcasts, webinars, or publications. Now, the title of Bronwyn's talk is Fears and Nightmares, Helping Your ADHD Child Regulate. It's going to be June 17th at 6:30 p.m. Central Time.
Yay, I'm excited.
All right. So am I. Thank you so much. I will podcast with you too any day.
You know what? For those of you who are joining us, and this sounds maybe so professionally done, this is take 2 because I forgot to hit record the first time. So thank you so much for Bronwyn for doing this twice. She only agreed to do it once, and then she still has one more thing to do for us when she presents to the parent talk. So I hope that you are going to be able to join us. June 17th at 6:30 p.m. Head over to ADHDKC.org, hit the events tab, and sign up so you can join us.
It was very fun both times.
Thank you very, very much.
You are very, very welcome.
Look
All right.
forward to seeing you on June 17th.
Sounds great.
Thanks.